Kristopher was the bigger person. He admitted what he had done wrong to his neighbor and tried to fix it. But his neighbor couldn't help but take advantage of him. He didn't really think anything would come of it when he opened his laptop and typed her name into Google. His mouth fell open when he stumbled upon photos he shouldn't have seen. He now knew all about her. Now that he had the upper hand, he was ready to make her regret what she had done. He knew he messed up and even told the truth to his neighbor. But how could she ask for even more? He didn't expect to find anything when he turned his computer on and typed her name into the search engine. That's when the photos appeared. He didn't want to believe it. He now knew the truth and had evidence to back himself up. He was going to get back what he deserved. But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. Kristopher Hess had felt recently like life was a drag. He pulled the same laborious shifts as a security guard for 16 hours a day. He did the same thing every day for a long time now and was sick of it. When a friend from out of town contacted him and told him that he'd come over for the 4th of July weekend, Kristopher felt like he actually had something to look forward to now. He just didn't know how things would pan out. Mark, Kristopher's long-standing friend, was going to come over and he was looking forward to it. He asked for leave so nothing could stand in his way of having a great weekend. He took out some of his small savings to get some extras for the weekend. What else is perfect for hanging out than some beer and a couple of snacks? But Mark would have other plans. The summer heat was beating down and there was a drought, but the friends still decided to hang out in the scorching yard with some deck chairs and beers. After they spoke for a bit, Mark suddenly had an idea about how they could spend their weekend. Mark smiled at him and suggested that the American way of celebrating the 4th of July would be with some fireworks. Kristopher was reluctant at first, but soon agreed. Kristopher went to his stash and got out the remainder of his savings. To be fair, I have had nothing but bad experiences with fireworks, so I had no idea how this would be any different, he said later. We got home with the fireworks and we laid them all out on the floor – sparklers, bottle rockets, cakes, and Roman candles. They took a look at the horde of fireworks they had amassed. Then Kristopher thought of which they should try first. Why don't we mess around with some sparklers since it's still not dark yet? Mark liked this idea and grinned at him. What the two didn't even think about was the problem in the backyard that would set up a great story with a moral. Kristopher lit the sparklers for them and thought back to their childhood as they drew white-hot images in the air with the hot sticks. The sparks were going everywhere as they both started gleefully laughing. One of the little sparkies from mine and my friend's sparkler made contact with the ground and made 2 small fires, Chris remembers. Kristopher watched in horror as the bone-dry yard started to catch fire. The flames quickly started spreading everywhere. Soon the neighbor's fence was in danger of becoming a smoldering pile of ashes. I ran as fast as I could to grab the garden hose and quickly started spraying down the fire. It was no use. It was spreading faster than I could spray it. That's when the neighbor saw her opportunity. As Kristopher called the fire department, Mark tried his best to put the fire out. It was in vain as the hit suddenly combusted in flames. Kristopher's neighbor suddenly came out to see what she could do. Kristopher felt extremely guilty about the situation. His neighbor had always seemed sweet and kind, but he swore he could see a smirk on her face as she walked back to her house. So Kristopher's weekend shaped up to be a disaster. He felt awful about the fence and felt annoyed that his well-deserved break was wasted. When he got home from yet another day of work, all he wanted to do was fall face first onto his bed. But inside his room, he found quite the surprise waiting for him. Kristopher found 2 quotes from his neighbor, one for $4,000 to cover the cost of a new fence and another for $6,000 to replace the burnt lawn. He didn't have that kind of money. In fact, he'd spent the last of his cash on the useless fireworks. He showed his dad the quote, which had been typed out on a Microsoft Word document. Seeing that there was no logo or company name, he hit the roof. "Son, don't you give that con artist a single dime," he yelled. As the cherry on the top, there was a rude note underneath the quote, "I will also be having you pay my water bill for 3 months because the new yard will need lots of water." Kristopher couldn't believe it. He took to Reddit to vent his anger. Now the fence this woman had before was raggedy and falling apart. Her yard? Dead grass, weeds everywhere, never mowed it. Now looking at this paper, she wants a mahogany fence and a brand new backyard with flowers and trimmed hedges. I said, "I need to get an estimate myself. This doesn't feel right." Kristopher contacted a contractor friend. He was certain that his neighbor's lawn had been in a terrible condition for years before this had happened, but the fire damage made it difficult to prove. As for the mahogany fence, fresh lawn, flowers, and trimmed hedges, Kristopher knew a guy who could do it all, and cheaply. He arranged for the contractor to come out to give him an estimate, but then things turned ugly. The next day, Kristopher met the contractor outside, but before he could begin to assess the damage, Patricia ran out, flailing her arms and screaming, "I did not give you permission to get an estimate on my fence." Well, technically, the fence separates the property line, so the fence belongs to both of us, Kristopher retorted. Obviously panicking that her plans were falling apart, the entitled neighbor called the cops. "She calls the cops on me for having a contractor, and they ultimately can't do a single thing because I'm on my property," Kristopher wrote. He quickly finishes the estimate off at $1,200. Luckily, Kristopher also knew a guy who did lawn care from his time working at a grocery store. He estimated the lawn reseeding while she was away from the house to be about $800. "After I get these estimates, I give copies to the woman and she is having none of it," he wrote on Reddit's pro-revenge thread. Upon seeing the estimates that Kristopher had gathered, Patricia yelled, "I don't know these people. I don't want them near my house. They're probably really bad contractors." Kristopher, trying to reason with her, replied, "No, I know them personally. They are really nice people and do great work." But his neighbor didn't want to hear it. She slammed the door in his face. But this is where the story gets interesting. I ended up working a 16-hour shift that night and got home at 8 a.m., and this woman comes knocking on my door at 9 a.m. and demanded I speak to her, Kristopher wrote. I explained, "I would really love to do this, but I just got home and I have to be back at work in less than 5 hours. I need to sleep." She goes, "What kind of lazy jerk sleeps in until 2 p.m.? Kristopher had been bullied for too long by this audacious woman. He'd had enough. At this point, I had about lost it and told her, "You can either accept my $2,000 for my quotes or get nothing." She stood there for a while with her mouth open, but she accepted my offer and planned to meet down at the notary the next morning, Kristopher explained. Thinking he had finally made her see things his way, he spent that night, after work, writing a contract and gathering the $2,000 in cash. But the battle was far from over. The next morning, Kristopher woke up and grabbed the contract. Thrilled to finally be done with this woman and never speak to her again, he went down to the notary to meet her. Kristopher waited for her for over 3 hours, but she didn't show up. I get a message from her saying, "I'm sorry, the $2,000 isn't enough. I'm having my guys start work on this project, and you will be paying me the full price." Oh, really? Kristopher thought to himself. He needed a plan. After that, I did not say a single word to her, and I watched for a few months as these guys turned her backyard into an oasis, complete with a small pond, brand new sod, flowers, the whole 9 yards, Kristopher wrote. I come to find out she had plans to remodel these things for a long time and was just waiting for the opportunity to go through with it. Now, Kristopher knew he had made a big mistake. He admitted that. He felt awful about burning down his neighbor's yard, but he'd been willing to pay a fair price to cover the damages. How dare she ask for more money? In a last-ditch effort to get justice, he fired up his computer. There, on a community Facebook page that she didn't know he was a member of, he saw the incriminating photos and he was incredulous. So this is what she had wanted the money for? She used her remodel funds to go on a trip to Hawaii. You know how I found out about this? She was bragging about it on the neighborhood Facebook group and didn't know I was in it, Kristopher wrote. There, for everyone to see, were pictures of his neighbor sipping expensive cocktails in a 5-star resort in Hawaii with her girlfriends while he scraped by getting the money to pay her. Are you ready for the revenge? He wrote, to the delight of Reddit users everywhere. Now, 4 months after the fire and all the remodels, I get served papers to go to court for $10,300. At 18 years old, I'm having to hire a lawyer to work my case, Kristopher continued. When we finally do get into court, I lay everything out, the quotes, being harassed multiple times, not showing up after agreeing to a deal, not wanting me to get my own quotes, required by law, by the way, and her bragging about conning me out of money, and I have proof of all of this. The judge looked at her and said, "Ma'am, with all due respect, you're out of your dadgum mind. Not only did this young man tell the truth about what happened, but he also offered to pay you more than he was supposed to." Kristopher recounts, "Your lawn was already dead before the fire occurred. Therefore, he is only responsible for the fence at $1,200. I will also deduct from this his lawyer fees." Kristopher concluded his story on Reddit. She took a huge financial loss from this. Not sure how much the Hawaii trip cost her, but she was in serious debt. She ended up having to sell the house because of it and moved into a smaller house. Haven't heard anything from her since." He added, "To this day, I still do not use fireworks because we could have really hurt someone. What I have learned through this, though, is it's best to take responsibility for your actions right out the gate."